I never thought a single night could change everything. But here I was, alone in my tiny apartment, the walls closing in like they wanted to hear every secret I had. The city outside was alive, cars honking, people shouting, lights flickering, but inside, only silence and shadows. Silence that whispered things I didn't dare speak aloud. It started as a small thought, almost harmless. A curiosity. But curiosity grew like a fire, and soon it was something more. Dark. Dangerous. A voice inside me kept repeating, "You could do it. No one would stop you. No one would ever know. And maybe, you wouldn't even feel bad." I looked at the envelope on my table. It was plain and unmarked, but I knew exactly what it held. Secrets. Lies. Betrayals carefully hidden for years. Names, faces, evidence. Everything someone could use to destroy another life. And I had it all. I had the choice. I could stay silent, do nothing, and keep living in my quiet, invisible world. Or I could act. And if I acted, I would cross a line. A line that once crossed, there was no return. My hands shook as I touched the paper. I felt the weight of it, like it was alive. The air in the room grew heavy, thick, pressing against my chest. I thought about the people who would be hurt if I acted. I thought about guilt, morality, and forgiveness. I thought about the small, fleeting life I had been living, always careful, always polite, always unseen. And then I realized, I didn't care. No, it wasn't carelessness. It was clarity. I had reached a point where the darkness inside me wasn't frightening anymore. It was liberating. A cold thrill ran through my veins. I wasn't scared. I was alive. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the envelope, listening to the hum of the city. My mind raced. Who will I ruin first? How far will I go? Can I really do this and keep my own hands clean? The questions didn't matter. Only one thing mattered. Tonight, I would act. Finally, I opened the envelope. Every word, every line, every hidden betrayal I had collected over months unfolded in front of me. I traced the ink with my finger, feeling a dark satisfaction in knowing how fragile human lives could be. Lies that could shatter marriages. Secrets that could destroy friendships. Truths that could make someone disappear without a trace. I thought about the faces that would fall when the world turned against them. I imagined the panic, the fear, and the hopelessness. And a smile crept across my face, cold, small, and unstoppable. I felt a pulse of power, raw and intoxicating, filling me from head to toe. I had never felt this alive. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights were bright, laughing at me, daring me to take the step. I held the envelope tightly, my knuckles white. My reflection stared back at me from the glass. And I whispered to myself, almost like a promise, I will do this. I will cross the line. And I will not regret it. Tonight, nothing would be the same. Tonight, someone's life would break. Tonight, I would do something unforgivable. And deep inside, a part of me already knew, I would enjoy every second of it. Morning came, but it did not feel like morning. The sky was gray and heavy, like it was holding its breath. I did not sleep. I lay on my bed all night, staring at the ceiling, listening to my own thoughts circle like hungry animals. The envelope sat on the table, untouched, watching me. I expected fear to come with the daylight. I expected regret. But none of it came. What I felt instead was calm. A strange, steady calm that scared me more than panic ever could. It felt like I had already decided everything long before last night. I made coffee and stood by the sink, staring at the dark liquid as if it could talk back to me. My hands were steady. That's when I knew this wasn't an accident or a moment of weakness. This was a choice. And I was ready to live with it. I sat down and opened the envelope again. I read every page slowly this time. Names. Dates. Messages. Proof. Each detail was sharp and clear, like a knife laid out carefully before a cut. These people trusted the world would never see this side of them. They trusted silence. They trusted people like me to look away. I didn't look away. Instead, I took out my phone. My heart beat a little faster, but not from fear. From anticipation. One message. One action. That was all it would take to start the fall. I typed carefully, choosing every word like it mattered, because it did. I didn't threaten. I didn't explain. I only revealed just enough truth to let panic grow on its own. My finger hovered over the screen. For 1 second, a small voice inside me whispered, "You can still stop." I closed my eyes, breathed in, and pressed send. That was it. The first move. The phone buzzed almost immediately. Then again. And again. Calls I did not answer. Messages I did not open. I let them pile up like unanswered prayers. I wanted them to feel the silence. I wanted them to sit in fear, wondering how much I knew and who else would find out. I went outside. The air felt different now, colder, sharper. People walked past me, smiling, talking, and living their simple lives. None of them knew what I had just done. None of them knew a storm had already begun. That made me feel powerful in a quiet, dangerous way. As the day passed, the world started to shift. I saw the signs online. Deleted posts. Sudden apologies with no explanation. Rumors are spreading like smoke. I watched it all from a distance, unseen, untouched. Every reaction fed the dark part of me I didn't know I had been starving. By nightfall, my phone was silent. Not because they stopped trying, but because they understood. They knew I was serious. They knew I had control. I stood by my window again, looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, people were panicking. Lives were cracking. And I felt nothing but satisfaction. This was only the beginning. I hadn't even gone all the way yet. And still, the world was already bending around my decision. I whispered to the empty room. I warned no one. And for the first time, I truly understood something that chilled me to the bone. Doing the unforgivable wasn't hard. Stopping would be. The first scream did not come through sound, it came through a message. I was sitting on my bed, phone in my hand, scrolling without seeing anything. Then it buzzed. A name appeared on the screen, one I never expected to see tied to this. My stomach tightened, but my face stayed calm. I opened the message slowly. It was short, shaking, full of fear. They knew. Not everything, but enough. I reread it again and again. This was not someone far away anymore. This was someone who knew my voice, my habits, and my past. Someone who had once sat across from me and smiled like nothing was wrong. And now, they were begging. Not apologizing. Begging. I felt something twist inside me. Not guilt. Not regret. Something colder. Satisfaction mixed with surprise. I hadn't planned for it to reach this close so fast. I stood up and paced the room. Every step echoed like a countdown. I told myself this was still control. Still part of the process. But my heart beat faster now, louder, like it was testing me. Another message came. Then another. They asked how much I knew. They asked what I wanted. They promised to fix things. They promised to do anything. Anything. That word stayed with me. I sat down and typed a reply. I deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. I realized something important then. I didn't want to negotiate. Negotiation meant mercy. And mercy was not why I started this. So I sent only one sentence. You should have thought about this earlier. The typing bubble appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Minutes passed. When the reply came, it was angry. Accusations. Denial. Blame. They tried to turn it on me, like they always had. Like they thought they still could. That was the moment something in me hardened for good. I opened my files again. I went deeper this time. I hadn't planned to use these parts yet, but plans change. Truth does not wait for comfort. I released another piece, not publicly, not loudly, just enough to make their fear real. Within hours, the silence around them grew heavy. Mutual friends stopped calling. Meetings were cancelled. Doors quietly closed. I watched it happen in real time, like dominoes falling without a sound. This wasn't chaos. This was precision. That night, I dreamed for the first time since it all began. I dreamed of standing in a room full of people, all of them staring at me. Their mouths moved, but no sound came out. I woke up calm, breathing slowly, my decision still firm. In the morning, the city looked normal again. That almost made me laugh. The world does not stop when something unforgivable happens. It simply makes room for it. My phone rang. I answered this time. There was crying on the other end. Real crying. Broken words. They said my name like it hurt to say it. They asked me why I was doing this. They said I was cruel. They said I had changed. I listened. I let every word land. Then I said quietly, no. I finally stopped pretending. I hung up before they could respond. As I placed the phone down, my hands were steady again. The fear I felt earlier was gone. In its place was something worse. Confidence. I knew now that I could keep going. That I would keep going. Because it was no longer just about what I did. It was about who I had become. And there was no going back. Days turned into nights, and nights into restless days. Sleep had become a stranger. I moved through the world like a shadow, watching, listening, waiting. The thrill of control had become addictive. I couldn't stop now, not because I wanted revenge, not because I wanted power, but because stopping felt like death. I began to notice the little things. The way people avoided my gaze. The trembling of hands that once reached for mine with trust. The small, desperate whispers behind closed doors. Each reaction was like a heartbeat I could feel from across the room, proof that I was changing them, shaping them, and no one could stop it. It was no longer about the original secret. That was just the spark. Now, I was building fire. I tested boundaries. I sent hints, half-truths, things they couldn't ignore. I let paranoia take root. I watched them question friends, question lovers, and question themselves. The fear was slow, perfect, delicious. I began keeping notes, careful records of what I knew, what I had done, and what they didn't know yet. Every detail mattered. Every hesitation I noticed, every lie they tried to hide from me, every tremor in their voice when they spoke. I captured it. But the darkness didn't stay outside. It crept in. I felt it whisper in my own thoughts, tempting me to push further, to break more, to make them crumble entirely. I would sit in my apartment, staring at the city lights through the cracked window, and wonder how far I could go before I became the person everyone feared, before I became the nightmare myself. It began with small obsessions. I followed them without leaving traces. I learned where they ate, where they slept, and who they trusted. Not to attack physically, not yet, but to feel the thrill of omnipresence, of knowing, of holding their lives in the hollow of my hands. I started to dream about them, too. Their panic, their shame, their desperation. And when I woke, my pulse raced. I wasn't sleeping anymore to rest. I slept to plan. I wasn't awake to live. I was awake to watch, to anticipate, to strike. Then came the first mistake, or maybe it was an awakening. I underestimated someone. Someone I thought was fragile, someone I thought would break under a whisper. But they didn't. They fought back in ways subtle and cunning. They planted seeds of doubt in mutual friends, whispers that slowly crept into the edges of my control. For the first time, I felt tension. Real tension. A shadow that wasn't mine. And that shadow excited me. I realized then that this game had changed. No longer was it simply about my power, my satisfaction. It had become something bigger. A dance of predators and prey, and I had invited someone else into my darkness. But even with that threat, I felt no fear. Only anticipation. The darkness wasn't frightening anymore. It was alive. And I was in it, fully awake, fully aware, and fully ready to cross lines I had not even dared imagine before. I looked at myself in the mirror one night. The face staring back was unfamiliar. The eyes were sharper, colder, and calculating. And for a moment, I almost laughed at the irony. I was becoming the unforgivable act itself. And I didn't regret it. The morning started quietly, but I knew it was a lie. Silence is never real when the world around you is trembling. By now, I had learned that every action has a ripple, and my ripples were becoming waves. I had created storms, and they were starting to hit the shore. I received the first call around 9. My hands were cold, my mind sharp. It was someone I hadn't considered, someone small and insignificant in my original plan. But the envelope, the hints, the fear I had sown. It reached them. Their voice shook as they whispered, "Please, stop. You don't understand what you're doing." I paused, listening. The words felt heavy, like stones dropping into water. But they did not reach me. I didn't answer. I let the line go silent. I wanted them to feel the weight of their own helplessness. I wanted them to realize that once the unforgivable begins, no one can simply walk away. By midday, the chaos had spread. Emails I had never sent were forwarded. Lies I had never told anyone. My subtle moves had triggered panic, suspicion, and betrayal among people who had thought they were untouchable. One by one, walls began to crack, secrets spilled, and alliances shattered. And then, it became personal. Someone I cared about, or at least thought I did, walked into my life that afternoon, completely unaware. They smiled at me like the world was safe, like nothing had changed. I wanted to warn them. I wanted to pull back to protect them. But I didn't. That was no longer an option. By now, everyone around me was either a weapon or a target. I realized I had crossed the point where innocence could survive near me. I sent another message. This time, it was deliberate and precise. A few words that hinted at the truth I held but did not reveal it entirely. The effect was immediate. The person's smile faltered. Their steps became hesitant. Fear bloomed in their eyes like fire spreading through dry grass. And then came the calls, one after another. Angry voices, desperate voices, voices I never thought I'd hear raised like that at me. They accused, threatened, and tried to bargain. But I knew that nothing they said could stop what had already begun. Nothing could undo what I had done. I had gone too far. By evening, the city outside felt different to me. The air was thick, tense, and charged with the energy of panic. I walked down the streets, unnoticed, yet I felt the invisible lines stretching toward me. I imagined eyes everywhere, doors closing quietly, and whispers following me. And I smiled. I had become untouchable, and yet, dangerously visible in a way only the unforgivable can make you. Night fell, and the phone rang again. This time, it was a voice that froze me. Calm, low, threatening. Someone who had seen the beginning of the storm and now wanted to know where it would end. I listened carefully. They spoke like a predator who had finally noticed another predator in the room. I realized then that I was not alone in this game. There were others who could play the same way, others who could match cunning with cunning. And a thrill ran through me at the thought. I put the phone down and stared at the envelope once more. It had grown heavy with possibility, heavy with the consequences of what I had done. And yet, I did not feel regret. I felt power. I felt alive. I felt unstoppable. That night, I wrote in my notebook, a record of the chaos I had created, the moves I had made, and the fear I had instilled. I wrote it all down, not because I feared forgetting, but because I wanted to remember. I wanted proof of what I had become. And somewhere deep inside, I admitted to myself the truth. The world had changed, and I had changed it. But I would not stop. Not yet. Not ever. Because once you do something unforgivable, the real game only begins when you realize that consequences are just another kind of power. By now, the game had a life of its own. I was no longer the only one moving pieces. Someone had noticed, someone had studied the chaos I created, and they weren't afraid. They were careful, patient, and worse, they were smart. It started with small signs. Misplaced documents. Emails I thought I deleted reappearing. Conversations I never had it repeated back to me. I knew immediately. I had a counter. Someone was watching me the way I had watched them. At first, I felt a thrill. Finally, a challenge worthy of my attention. But that thrill soon turned into tension. Because they were methodical. They didn't make noise. They didn't panic. They moved quietly, like a shadow I couldn't catch. One evening, I returned to my apartment to find the door slightly open. My heart didn't race, not in panic, but in focus. I entered slowly, my eyes scanning every corner. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was stolen. But I knew someone had been there. The envelope sat on the table. I picked it up carefully. Nothing was missing. Nothing was added. But the weight of it had changed. I felt eyes on me. And I realized I was being played now. The next days were a blur of tension. I received notes, anonymous, precise hints that someone knew everything I had done, everything I planned. For the first time, I understood fear from the other side. The feeling was sharp, real, and uncomfortable. But it was also intoxicating. I couldn't stop. I didn't want to. Then, it got personal again. They contacted someone I had tried to protect. Someone who had walked close to me in trust. I saw the panic in their eyes. The desperation in their voice when they begged for mercy. And I realized that my actions, the things I had done without regret, had consequences I hadn't fully understood. But I didn't stop. Instead, I responded. I sent messages, left hints, and manipulated events, not blindly, but strategically. I was in a battle now, not against weakness, but against someone as cunning as I was. Every move had to be calculated. Every word measured. One mistake and the whole web could collapse, taking me with it. And yet, the darkness inside me didn't flinch. It thrived. Every step of the fight, every moment of tension, and every threat I faced only sharpened my focus. I was no longer just someone who did the unforgivable. I was someone who could survive it, who could thrive in it, who could shape it into a weapon. By nightfall, I realized something terrifying. I had crossed another line, not just in what I did, but in who I had become. The fight had changed me more than the original act ever did. I wasn't just unforgivable. I was unstoppable. And somewhere, deep inside, I smiled. Because the game was no longer about fear. It was about control. And I intended to win. The city had grown darker in my eyes. Not because the sun didn't rise, but because I had begun to see the world through a lens no one else could. A lens sharpened by fear, obsession, and power. Every interaction felt like a potential trap. Every smile hid suspicion. Every whisper promised betrayal. By now, the person fighting back had become more than a shadow. They were real, present, and calculating. I could feel them in every corner of my life, a ghost I couldn't shake. They were testing me, probing me, daring me to make mistakes. And I did not intend to fall. Not now. Not ever. The lines I had once thought untouchable were gone. I no longer cared about what was moral, what was just, or what could destroy someone else. The world had taught me that morality was weak. Fear, precision, and patience were strong. And I was becoming stronger with every passing day. I began leaving traps for them. Subtle hints, false leads, and whispers designed to mislead and provoke. It was a game now, a dangerous game where every move could be my last. I watched, waited, and calculated. The thrill of control had shifted into something darker, a thrill of anticipation, of seeing who would blink first. But they were clever. Too clever. They anticipated some of my moves, countered others, and even turned one or two against me. I had underestimated their patience, their cunning, and the depth of their own unforgivable acts. The fight had escalated far beyond what I had imagined. Then came the day it became personal again. Someone I loved, someone I had thought I could protect, was caught in the crossfire. Their life, once innocent and safe, now teetered on the edge because of my decisions. I felt a pang, not regret, but awareness. Awareness that even the unforgivable has consequences that can pierce the soul in ways the mind cannot ignore. I moved quickly. I erased traces, guided events, and manipulated outcomes. I kept them alive, barely. Not out of mercy. Not out of conscience. Out of control. The act of saving them was a reminder that I held power over life and death, and that power was intoxicating. By night, exhaustion pressed down on me like a physical weight. My apartment felt smaller, tighter. My reflection in the mirror was a stranger, eyes cold, jaw hard, posture tense. I had changed, irrevocably. I had crossed line after line, and there was no returning. Yet, in the stillness of the night, I realized something terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. I was no longer afraid of anything. Not them. Not the chaos. Not even myself. I whispered into the darkness. I am beyond regret. I am beyond fear. And I will not lose. Somewhere, deep in the city, my opponent watched, waited, and planned. I knew the game was far from over. But for the first time, I relished the uncertainty. Because in this darkness, where lines were broken and morality was meaningless, I had found something extraordinary. I had found freedom. And I was never letting go. The first thing that broke was not a person, it was time. Days no longer followed nights in any order that made sense. I woke up unsure if I had slept for minutes or hours. My phone buzzed constantly, then went silent for long stretches that felt louder than noise. I lived inside that silence now. It wrapped around me, heavy and close, like a warning that never fully spoke. The fight had reached a stage where planning was no longer enough. Things were moving on their own. People were reacting without being pushed. Fear had learned how to spread without my help. And that was when I understood something dangerous. The unforgivable does not stay under control forever. The one fighting me stepped into the open. Not with a threat. Not with anger. With truth. They released something I had not prepared for. Not about my actions, but about me. A version of me shaped carefully, stitched together from pieces of my past, my silences, my patterns. It wasn't fully accurate. It didn't need to be. It only needed to sound believable. And it did. I watched the reactions ripple outward. Confusion first. Then doubt. Then fear. People began to look at me differently. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Messages went unanswered. Trust, once cracked, is now shattered completely. For the first time since the beginning, I felt pressure in my chest. Not panic. Not guilt. Something heavier. Exposure. I tried to counter it. I released truths, sharper ones, more damaging ones. I reminded the world of who really deserved to fall. But the balance had shifted. Chaos no longer listened only to me. It was everywhere now, wild and uncontrollable. Someone confronted me late one night. Someone who knew me before all of this. Their eyes searched my face, desperate to find the person they remembered. They asked me one question. Was it worth it? I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because I knew too well. That night, everything collapsed at once. Careers ended. Relationships burned. Names were dragged through public judgment with no mercy. And hidden inside all of it was my hand, my decision, my unforgivable act, now tangled so deeply that even I could no longer separate myself from the damage. I stood alone in my apartment as the city glowed outside, brighter than ever, cruel in its beauty. I felt hollow and full at the same time. The power was still there, but so was the weight. Heavy. Constant. Inescapable. For the first time, I wondered not if I would regret what I had done, but if I would survive it. And yet, even as everything fell apart around me, one truth remained unshaken. If I had to do it again, I would make the same choice. Because the unforgivable had become my identity. And there was no undoing that. After the collapse, there was no explosion. Only quiet. It was the kind of quiet that comes after something dies and no one is brave enough to speak its name. The city still moved. People still laughed. But my world had narrowed to a small, heavy space inside my chest where everything echoed. I stopped checking my phone. There was nothing left to read. No threats. No begging. No power plays. Just distance. Cold. Final distance. The one who fought me disappeared. Not in a dramatic way. No final message. No victory speech. They simply stepped out of the storm and left me standing in it alone. That hurt more than any attack. It meant the game was over. And I was the only one still playing. I walked through familiar streets and felt like a stranger. Places that once held meaning now felt empty, like abandoned sets after a show had ended. People I passed looked normal. Untouched. And I realized something bitter. The world had taken the damage and moved on. I had not. I thought about the people who fell. Some deserved it. Some didn't. I didn't sort them anymore. Sorting required care. I had gone past that. All I had now was memory, and memory does not ask permission before it hurts. At night, I dreamed again. Not of control or power, but of still moments. Faces I used to know. Words I never said. Doors I closed so tightly they could never be opened again. I woke up tired in a way sleep could not fix. And yet, I still did not regret it. That truth settled in slowly, heavily. I searched myself for guilt, for shame, for the kind of pain that makes people beg for forgiveness. It never came. What I felt was loss, yes, but loss is not regret. Loss is simply the price. I understood now what the unforgivable really costs. It does not take your peace in one loud moment. It takes it quietly, piece by piece, until silence becomes normal. I stood in front of a mirror one morning and studied my face. It looked older. Not in years, but in knowing. I had seen behind the curtain of people, of systems, of lies. And once you see that, you cannot unsee it. I was no longer hunted. I was no longer powerful. I was simply changed. And that was the final consequence no one warns you about. You don't walk away clean. You don't walk away free. You walk away awake. I turned away from the mirror and packed a small bag. There was nothing left for me where I was. No enemy. No audience. No redemption waiting at the end. Only the last chapter. Only the question of what comes after you survive the unforgivable. I left without telling anyone. There was no goodbye worth giving, and no one left who needed to hear it. I took only what I could carry. The rest belonged to a version of me that no longer existed. The road was long and empty. Towns passed without names that mattered. I watched them through windows, never staying long enough to be remembered. That felt right. After everything I had done, being unseen was not a punishment. It was a choice. Time moved differently now. Slower. Quieter. Without enemies, without plans, and without fear chasing me, I had space to think. And in that space, the truth stayed with me, steady and clear. I had done something unforgivable. And I still did not regret it. Not because it was right. Not because it was justified. But because it was honest. For the first time in my life, I had acted without asking permission. Without shrinking. Without pretending to be good just to be safe. I had chosen my own line, and crossed it knowing exactly what it would cost. I lost people, I lost places, I lost the version of myself that believed life could be lived without consequence. But I gained something else. I gained clarity. I no longer lied to myself about who I was or what the world really was. I understood now that darkness doesn't always come from evil, it comes from truth exposed too sharply, too suddenly, for comfort. Some nights, I still remembered faces. Some names still burned when I thought of them. But memory did not ask for forgiveness, and neither did I. I carried those moments the way you carry scars, not with pride, not with shame, but with acceptance. One evening, as the sun sank low and the sky turned quiet shades of gray and gold, I stopped walking and sat alone. The world felt wide again. Not threatening. Not heavy. Just open. I realized then that the story did not end with redemption or punishment. Those are things people tell themselves to feel safe. Real endings are quieter. They are simply lived. I stood up and kept walking, not toward something, not away from something, but forward. Changed. Awake. Whole in a way I had never been before. I did something unforgivable. And I didn't regret it. Not then. Not now. Not ever.